Lionel Richie canceled his concert in Chicago tonight at the United Center after an on-stage health scare during Wednesday night show in Minnesota.
Now we're hearing from fans who are worried about their grandmother's health.
90 minutes into what should have been a routine opening night, a 77-year-old man who has spent 5 decades convincing the world he was indestructible had to admit, in front of 10,000 strangers, that his body had other plans. That night in St. Paul, Minnesota, has since sent ripples through the music industry, through fan forums, and through the offices of a tour that still has more than 24 dates left on its calendar. What happened to Lionel Richie on June 24, 2026, and what has unfolded in the days since, is the story everyone in the entertainment world is quietly watching, because it raises a question none of us want to answer honestly. What happens when the legends we grew up with start running out of road? Richie built his career on the idea of effortlessness. From his earliest days performing with the Commodores at Tuskegee University, through the multi-platinum run of Can't Slow Down in 1983, to his ongoing role on the judging panel of American Idol, the man has projected an almost supernatural consistency. He does not cancel. He does not falter. Even into his late 70s, while contemporaries from the same Motown-adjacent era trimmed their touring schedules or stepped away from the stage entirely, Richie kept booking arenas, kept selling them out, and kept walking on stage like a man who had simply decided age did not apply to him. That reputation is precisely what made the events in St. Paul so jarring, and precisely why the fallout has continued to dominate headlines nearly a week later. The tour, co-headlined with Earth, Wind and Fire and branded the Sing a Song All Night Long tour, was supposed to be a celebratory summer run, more than 24 stops stretching from the Midwest through the East Coast and into Europe, with tickets moving briskly in market after market. Richie had posted excitedly on Instagram just hours before the St. Paul show, thanking his band and crew for the rehearsals and sound checks that had led up to opening night, captioning the photos with the kind of enthusiasm that gave no hint of what was coming. By all outward appearances, this was a man in full command of his faculties, ready for another summer of arena-sized adoration. For the first 55 minutes at Grand Casino Arena, that is exactly what fans got. Richie moved through his catalog with the polish audiences have come to expect, and the crowd of roughly 10,000 people responded the way crowds always respond to him, with the kind of unrestrained joy reserved for songs that have soundtracked entire lifetimes. Then, according to fan-captured footage from the venue, Richie began performing Dancing on the Ceiling, one of his most physically demanding and energetic numbers, while seated on a set of steps at the front of the stage. Something, by his own account, he had never done before in all his years performing that song. He told the crowd directly that he was feeling dizzy and strange. What followed has been dissected endlessly online in the days since. Richie tried to keep the mood light in the moment, telling the audience, "When you're feeling dizzy, sit your ass down," before moving to a piano to perform 3 Times a Lady while seated. It was, by most fan accounts, a genuinely funny moment, the kind of self-deprecating humor Richie has always leaned on. But the levity did not last. After finishing that song, he announced an unplanned intermission, something that was not part of his scheduled 90-minute set, and walked off the stage. He did not come back. The uncertainty that filled the arena during the following stretch has become one of the more talked-about details of the entire episode. Band members reportedly lingered on stage for roughly 15 minutes before also exiting, with recorded music playing over the speakers to fill the silence, leaving fans to wonder whether they were witnessing an unusually long costume change or something more serious. Roughly 40 minutes after Richie disappeared backstage, his saxophonist, Dino Saldo, walked out to the microphone and delivered the news nobody wanted to hear. According to reporting from the Minnesota Star-Tribune, Saldo told the crowd plainly, "Unfortunately, Lionel is not feeling well. He won't be able to continue." Behind the scenes, the situation was being treated with real urgency. TMZ was among the first outlets to report that St. Paul Fire EMS transported Richie from the arena to a local hospital, though his exact condition was not immediately disclosed and no detailed medical update followed that night. The lack of a formal diagnosis in those initial hours created exactly the kind of information vacuum that tends to swallow celebrity health stories whole, with fans piecing together theories from grainy phone footage and second-hand quotes from bandmates rather than any statement from Richie's own camp. The fallout arrived quickly and decisively. Less than 24 hours after the St. Paul show ended abruptly, Live Nation and the venues hosting his next 2 dates confirmed that the tour was being paused, at least temporarily. According to a statement carried by The Hollywood Reporter and echoed across entertainment outlets nationwide, Richie's Friday show in Chicago and Saturday show in Columbus, Ohio, were both postponed, with the United Center stating that doctors had advised him to rest and return to full health before resuming the tour. The statement, issued jointly by the venues rather than by Richie personally, added a note of real emotional weight, describing the singer as heartbroken over having to disappoint fans in 2 major markets on short notice. That gap between the cancellations and any personal comment from Richie himself became its own subplot in the story. It was not Richie, but his ex-wife, Brenda Harvey Richie, who first offered any kind of reassurance to the public. She posted on social media the day after the cancellations, writing, thanking everyone for their concern. Lionel is okay and will be back on the stage, a message that briefly calmed some of the more anxious corners of his fan base. But Brenda Richie did more than reassure. She also pushed back publicly against critics questioning whether a 77-year-old man should still be attempting a full-scale arena tour at all, replying pointedly that it was not up to strangers to decide when someone should retire. That exchange added a layer of tension to the story that went beyond Richie's physical health, touching on a broader and more uncomfortable question about aging performers, audience expectations, and who gets to decide when enough is enough. It is worth remembering that this is not the first time Richie's body has forced a pause on his career. In the 1990s, at what was arguably the peak of his commercial dominance, he developed a mysterious condition affecting his vocal cords that required 4 separate surgeries before doctors finally traced the root cause to acid reflux triggered by his diet. That ordeal stretched across years of uncertainty, and Richie has said in past interviews that during that period he genuinely feared his singing career, the only career he had ever known, might be permanently over. More recently, in his 2025 memoir, Richie opened up for the first time about a childhood and adult life shaped by undiagnosed ADHD, describing years of sensory overload that went unnamed simply because the clinical language did not yet exist when he was growing up in Alabama. Neither of those chapters is believed to be medically connected to what happened in St. Paul, but together they complicate the image of Richie as an untouchable showman, revealing instead a performer who has quietly managed serious health challenges for most of his adult life while presenting an almost flawless public face. For nearly a week, that unresolved tension, a legend down but not confirmed to be out, dominated coverage of the story. Then came Pittsburgh. On June 30th, exactly as the postponement statement had promised, Richie returned to the stage at PPG Paints Arena to resume the tour alongside Earth, Wind and Fire. What happened that night did more to answer the public's questions than any press release could have. According to footage and reporting that circulated within hours of the show, Richie appeared visibly energetic while performing songs like Stuck on You, moving through the set with none of the hesitation that had defined the St. Paul performance. More striking than his physical stamina, though, was what he chose to say. For the first time since the hospitalization, Richie addressed the audience directly about what he had been through, and the honesty in that moment landed hard with fans who had spent days speculating in the dark. According to detailed reporting on the Pittsburgh show, Richie joked with the crowd about the flood of unsolicited advice and home remedies he had received in the days since St. Paul, from a friend warning him that things happen differently once you turn 80, to a fan suggesting he ride a scooter across the stage, to someone recommending a finger of castor oil behind the ear as a cure for dizziness. It was classic Richie, deflecting real vulnerability through humor, but underneath the jokes was something more candid than fans had heard from him in years. He told the crowd he was trying to forget everything that had happened, and declared, "I ain't going nowhere," before sitting down at the piano to play Easy, one of his signature hits with the Commodores. That single night in Pittsburgh reframed the entire narrative, at least for now. What had looked, in the immediate aftermath of St. Paul, like the possible beginning of a serious decline, instead resolved into something closer to a genuine but survivable scare, the kind that forces an artist to publicly reckon with his own mortality without necessarily ending his career. Richie is reportedly still expected to complete the remainder of the tour, which stretches through late August and includes international stops in Malta and England, and industry sources suggest he is still expected to return this fall for another season judging American Idol, even though that has not been formally confirmed by the show or by Richie's representatives. Still, it would be a mistake to treat this as a story with a tidy, closed ending. No detailed medical explanation for the dizziness has ever been made public. Doctors advised rest, venues issued careful statements, and Richie himself offered humor rather than specifics when he finally spoke. The precise cause behind an episode serious enough to warrant an ambulance and a hospital visit remains, as of this recording, something only Richie and his medical team fully understand. That gap between what fans witnessed on video and what has actually been confirmed in writing is exactly the kind of uncertainty that keeps a story like this alive well past the initial headlines, and it is likely to keep resurfacing every time Richie takes the stage for the remainder of this tour. What makes this moment resonate beyond the world of celebrity gossip is the uncomfortable mirror it holds up for anyone watching a parent, a grandparent, or an idol from their own youth grow older in real time. Richie has spent decades as a symbol of consistency, a voice that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of aging, still filling arenas in his late 70s while so many of his peers scaled back or disappeared from touring entirely. Watching him sit through Dancing on the Ceiling, a song literally built around motion, and hearing him later admit in his own words how frightened that night left him, strips away some of that mythology. It replaces it with something more human, and in many ways more moving, a reminder that even the performers we treat as permanent fixtures of our own history are, underneath the lights and the legacy, just people whose bodies eventually ask them to slow down, even if only for a night. For now, the tour continues. The Pittsburgh crowd got to hear him laugh about castor oil remedies and declare that he was not going anywhere, and the story that began with genuine alarm in St. Paul has, at least temporarily, found a hopeful resolution. Whether that resolution holds through the rest of a demanding summer schedule is something only time, and Richie's own body, will decide. What is certain is that fans who have followed his voice through 5 decades of heartbreak anthems and celebration songs were reminded, in the space of a single unscripted evening, just how much they still care about the man behind them, and just how much they are hoping he gets every remaining mile of this tour, and many more after it.